My name is Karen Burton, and this is my investigative report on pests in libraries, accidental returns, and the patrons you don't want to attract. Imagine these scenarios. You walk into the break room at your library one night, flip on the light, and see lots of roaches scurrying under the refrigerator. Or a patron comes to you and says, "There are bugs crawling on this chair I just sat in." And we've all gotten those books returned with a little something extra between the pages. Bugs. We all have different reactions to unexpectedly encountering an insect. Some people scream and run away. Some observe cautiously from a distance. And me? I usually chase them and try to capture them. Going on a walk with me often turns into an informative nature trek, much to my family's chagrin. On the other hand, I'm always the one they yell for when a wasp or cockroach wanders into our house. Insects are all around us, whether we know it or not. We can't live without them, but we certainly don't want to live with them. They invade our houses and gardens, eat our food, bite and sting us, and even kill us through vector-borne diseases such as malaria. Insects are unwelcome guests in many settings. And who hasn't checked hotel reviews for mentions of bed bugs before booking that hotel? Well, it turns out libraries are often invaded by insects. Most are familiar foes, such as ants and roaches, while some are more obscure, like silverfish. And of course, there is the dreaded bed bug. Sometimes insects are attracted by what is already in the library, like food trash and books, while some are attracted by patrons or turned in with the books. We've all seen books returned in disgusting condition. And this is a real picture of a book I received one time, and it did not go well for the patron. So we've all seen these books returned, and it's not much of a stretch to imagine insects hitching a ride. Today I am going to help you learn how to answer these questions about what bugs you. What insect pests are commonly found in libraries? How do I monitor for them? And most importantly, what do I do when I inevitably find them? So pests you might meet in a library. The most likely pests you will find in a library are roaches, ants, silverfish, and bedbugs. Any indoor structure is susceptible to roaches and ants because they like the environment. There's food, water, nooks and crannies to shelter in, and plenty of space. Just like your house, libraries have those things too. Plus, cellulose-based book glue, in other words plant-based, is delicious to roaches and silverfish. Bedbugs are accidental returns, or they tag along with patrons. So how do I keep pests out is a great question to ask. Most libraries use a form of integrated pest management. Basically, that is making an environment inhospitable to pests, monitoring the environment, and using chemical treatments as a last resort. So many people have an exterminator come and inspect their house regularly for pests and apply preventative pesticide treatments. If your library wants to go that route and has the budget, it's a possibility. The most important thing is that some kind of monitoring program exists. You don't need a professional exterminator to monitor for pests in your library, but someone needs to be in charge or it won't get done. Now you're probably thinking, how on earth do I write out procedures for monitoring, identifying, and taking action on pest problems? I don't know anything about bugs. Well, it turns out you don't have to. At the end of this presentation, I have a link to a Google Doc I put together that has links to many different helpful resources. So you can check those out for ideas for creating your library's pest management plan. So back to monitoring. The person in charge of monitoring for pests needs to have written procedures, and they have to document what they find, or hopefully don't find. That can be as simple as a notebook in the circulation drawer. It can be a spreadsheet on an accessible drive. It can be a database if you want to get fancy. How you document doesn't matter, so much as that you do document. You need to document the date, the type of insect, the number, and if possible, take a picture of what you see. That way, if you do have to call in professional help, you will have more data to give them so they can help you more effectively with your problem. So things you can do to make your library less inviting for pests is to clean regularly. Take the trash out every night. Don't leave food out. Standing water is a great invitation for insects, so if you have any leaks, fix them fast. Don't store stuff on the floor. That box of gift books you got 6 months ago probably doesn't need to sit in the floor because that is where insects are, and they will probably think that's a pretty good home. Climate control is something most libraries have down already. Cool, low humidity, and good air circulation is good for books. No plants. We think they look pretty and inviting, but dirt and plants are like putting out a big neon flashing vacancy sign to insects. So keep your plants plastic. They'll stay alive longer and you won't be providing a hotel for bugs. I found a bug. Now what do I do? Well, first you have to figure out what it is. And one of the great ways to figure out what kind of pests you have is to look at their poop, which sounds gross, but it's pretty effective. So I'm going to show you pictures of the most common insects. Now that saying a picture is worth 1,000 words is true when it comes to identifying insects and signs of them. In other words, their poop. Having laminated cards of pictures, either these or other good ones, at all book check-in points would be great because it reminds staff to look for pests and provides a good visual reference for seeing what your problem is. So these are several common roaches. Brown-banded cockroaches really aren't a problem indoors in South Carolina, but the ones you're most likely to see are the Oriental and the German. The American cockroach and the smoky brown are we call them palmetto bugs sometimes, but they're the ones that fly around and scare everybody. But they're mostly woodland roaches. They prefer to live outside, but they wander in. The Oriental and the German cockroaches, libraries are great. Now I like this diagram because it shows you the adults on the top, and it shows you the nymphs, which are the smaller baby cockroaches, and on the bottom, those are cockroach egg sacs. If you see any, get rid of them because they will hatch hundreds of baby roaches. So this slide also has what roach poop looks like on books and in the corner. So if you see that, you might have a roach problem. Ants. We have all dealt with ants in our houses or outside. There are too many species of ants for you to identify them yourself reliably. You've got a couple options if you really need to know what kind of ants they are. If you call an exterminator, they can probably identify them. Or you can capture them, preserve them in some isopropyl alcohol, and send them to your county extension agency to identify them. Silverfish are not as common, but you do find them around books because they literally eat the books and the book glue. But this is what they look like. They're very small, about 1/2 inch long, and flat. And the dreaded bed bug. This is what an adult bed bug looks like, but they're much, much smaller. And you can see the bed bug poop on the edge of a book and in between the pages. So that's what you're going to be looking for. So, bed bugs. You've tried to keep the pests out of your library, but sometimes they get in. You find them through your monitoring program, you document what you found, and you identify them. What's next? You need to decide if you should first try to deal with the problem yourself or call professional help, and that will depend on what type of pest you find. If someone turns in a book with some bed bugs, it's pretty easy to deal with if it's caught before it leaves the book drop or the circulation counter. We're all familiar with how quarantine works right now, and that's what needs to happen to books with suspicious stains on them indicating a possible insect problem. Circulation should keep a large supply of plastic bags that are big enough to fit a book in. When they check in a book, circulation needs to inspect each book for bugs, and if anything looks suspicious, immediately put it in a sealed plastic bag. Depending on what type of insect is in there, they can be quarantined at room temperature or they can be frozen. Depends on what kind of insect is and how long the life cycle is. As you can see from the bed bugs, you have eggs, nymphs, which are baby bed bugs, and the adults. You can take care of the adults, but if the eggs are left, you're going to have more bed bugs. So, bed bugs on the furniture. Bed bug-ridden furniture should never just be removed to an unseen back room right then, because when you move it, it will shake the bed bugs and their eggs loose, leaving an unseen trail full of ticking time bomb bedbug eggs. Instead, you should have a supply of plastic wrap like is used for moving furniture, as you can see from that picture. Have a roll of that in the back room, available to wrap and seal the chair in place. Then you can move it out to where the public can't see it, or even outside just to get it out of the library. A single bedbug-infested book that's immediately quarantined, ants eating the trash in the bake room, or a few roaches in the bathroom is probably something you can attempt to control yourself, and we'll talk about resources for that later. Bedbugs infesting a chair in the children's section requires professional assistance. Bedbug infestations always require professional assistance. Even if you have no money in the budget, find some. Bedbug problems will only get worse if you don't deal with them early, and the public relations nightmare is going to be more expensive than the bedbug treatment. So when you can't deal with the problem yourself, you need to call a professional exterminator. This is like going to the doctor to get a prescription. Yeah, you can buy over-the-counter medicine, but they can give you much better drugs. Exterminators have a pesticide applicator's license that allows them to purchase and use pesticides you do not have access to. Exterminators are licensed by state. They have to pass an exam, though many states have reciprocity, so if you're on a state line, you may be able to hire exterminators from over the state line. Most will keep dual licenses if there is not reciprocity. Exterminators have to pass a test to get their license, and they have to do continuing education and recertification every few years. They are much better than that can of rage you picked up at Walmart. That saying, knowledge is power, exterminators know the insects they deal with and can use effective strategies to control them. So how do you find one? Well, if possible, you want an exterminator who has worked for a library before, so ask your fellow librarians for recommendations or who to avoid. You can simply Google exterminator or pest control services near me. You'll get lots of results. Once you have some names of businesses or individuals, you need to make sure they're licensed for structural pests like ants and roaches or bedbugs. In South Carolina, 7A is the type of license that will fit most library pest control needs. I have included links in the resource document for South Carolina to verify the business you have chosen has a current pesticide applicator license. You can search for any citations and make sure their license is the right category. For other states, I recommend Googling whatever state you're in Department of Pesticide Regulation, and that should set you on the right track. So today you have learned what pests you might see in your library, how to monitor for them, what to do when you find them, and how to call in professional help when needed. Now, some pest control suggestions are better than others, and I ran across a rather hilarious one while researching for this project. Now, this is published in Library Journal, a very reputable publication. The authors of this paper suggested, in all seriousness, that books should be microwaved when turned in to kill pests. The reasoning was that the microwave would only affect the little bundles of fat and protein, i.e. the bugs, while leaving the paper unaffected. Well, that was in 1989, as you can see from the microwave. And as much as I combed the literature, I could not find any follow-up to that article, besides this one. Really bad ideas throughout history. So while microwaving books might have worked in theory, I don't think the authors took into account the possible metallic ingredients in the ink or lettering on the book itself. And a book with an RFID tag would be a complete disaster. For more helpful ideas on how to deal with pests in your library, I've put together a Google Doc with the references I used for this presentation and a list of links you may find helpful for creating and implementing a pest control plan in your library. Some are specific to South Carolina, but many are applicable to anywhere in the U.S. Thank you for joining me today to learn about pests in libraries. And if you find a bug in your library, you can still scream and run away, but head in the direction of your pest control plan.